Well, this certainly is not the idea that I thought we'd be bringing up in today's show. Let's head over onto theprovince.com and take a look at the most popular article on the day as published by Ben Kuzma. Canucks Coffee. Bruce Boudreau brews on JT Miller and ELIAS Pettersson disconnect. Management must contend with the what if. What if Miller and Pettersson can't put their divide aside and get the Canucks to the postseason? Well, we're discussing JT Miller and ELIAS Pettersson one more time, but this time we are revisiting the comments that Bruce Boudreau made. And no, not the ones that we had spoken about from TSN Overdrive, we are going over onto this new interview. Because what I found the most interesting about this Bruce Boudreau commentary on the matter was his, not really like solution, but why this wasn't really a big deal back when he was the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. Bruce Boudreau might have just revealed the antidote as to why Petey and Miller were able to coincide properly all those years ago. The article opens up by acknowledging that winning solves everything and losing exposes all the ugly things. It's an accurate assessment to place the stress and strain of professional team sports in the proper perspective. You win a lot and everyone's happy, or at least they tolerate someone they don't connect with. If you lose a lot, and fingers point and tempers flare. And that might be the best conclusion to chronicle the constant noise that is yet to abate regarding the Vancouver Canucks and their fishbowl existence in a hockey-mad market. The heavily reported divide between Miller and Pettersson, players contend it's not an issue even though it has been broached, has been headline material and podcast fodder for months across the NHL. Months, eh? Yeah. I feel like it's even been longer than that, but let's continue here. I love this article because Ben Kuzma does such a good job at articulating the intricacies of what the media's spotlight is pointing towards here, and he's very acknowledging that, yeah, if the Canucks were just winning, if the Canucks were successful like they were last year, this Pettersson-Miller thing wouldn't be a thing. But now that the team is losing, maybe tempers are flaring a little bit more in the locker room. Maybe it's a lot more difficult to fully move past whatever issues may be there because the team needs to find reasons that they're losing. There needs to be a reason. There needs to be explanations. And so the media, fans, myself, most likely you and everybody else included, everybody is talking about this Miller and Pettersson thing, including Bruce Boudreau. I've never experienced it to the way that it's gotten to the press, something in Vancouver where it's just persisting. Former Canucks head coach Bruce Boudreau said on a telephone interview Monday, "Obviously, it was there when I was there, and it has been consistent over the years. But I never understand it. I've been on teams where there are teammates that you just don't like and you don't go over to their houses for dinner or whatever. When it comes to the rink and you put that jersey on, everybody is on the same side. That was the case when I was there. It wasn't a question of Miller and Pettersson liking each other, but if something good happened, they hugged each other, and for the most part, they played in the same line for crying out loud. But the more we make out of it, the disconnect, the worse it is in my mind." And so, this isn't necessarily new from Bruce Boudreau. He has acknowledged the quote-unquote rift that was there in the past, but I guess he goes out there and gives a little bit more details here. Details that I don't think anybody's too surprised about. Again, like, oh yeah, Pettersson and Miller, they're not playing PlayStation together, they're not going to each other's houses for dinner, they're not really, like, good friends. That's something that we have also heard from these players themselves over the years. That their relationship is evolving, how they're not necessarily the most similar personalities, but they are guys that are professionals and they're able to get past their differences and work together and everything. But now, you even go back to the beginning of the season. Pettersson was knocked around by JT in practice. Miller called Petey a baby. And like, now it's gotten to this point where everybody's talking about whether or not one of these guys should be traded or whatever, and it's made even worse when you acknowledge that Pettersson played some of his best hockey in the past year when Miller wasn't in the lineup. Of course, you can't discredit what Pettersson did before the All-Star break last season as well. I mean, Miller was still playing well there too, so obviously the Canucks are no longer in a spot where Miller, Petey, and Hughes are near the top of the NHL in points like they were last season. That seemed to have been a one-and-done kind of opportunity that is a long ways away from repeating itself when you consider where the team is at this season. But Bruce Boudreau then makes a very interesting comment. He talks about the existence of this rift, but then he also talks about why things were okay before. There's no doubt there's friction because their personalities are so different. The alpha in Miller can control the room. But one of the great things when I was there was Tanner Pearson being a real conduit. He sat beside Petey and he was really good friends with Miller. He did a lot of smoothing things out. I don't think the Canucks have a guy like that anymore. Maybe Tyler Myers. If that's the case, Kuzma writes, then has it gotten to the point where the Canucks management must ponder the what if? What if Miller and Pettersson aren't willing to find the common ground? What if they can't put their opposing personalities and oil and water existence on the back burner and fire up a collective desire to get the team where they need to be? What if it's addition by subtraction? Now, lo and behold, Kuzma is not writing that Tanner Pearson needs to be added to Vancouver from Vegas. That's not what he's saying at all. But I did want to dive into that particular characteristic about Pearson, because Tanner Pearson has had a really strange career up until this point. Stanley Cup champion with LA, he was fantastic over there. Then he went over to Pittsburgh, he wasn't really good over there, and then he got sent over to Vancouver and was really good to open up his tenure with this team. Tanner Pearson had 12 points in 19 games after being traded for Eric Goodbranson, and then he had 45 points in 69 games the year after that. The Canucks made the bubble playoffs, he was pretty alright over there, and then things continued down the path they're at now. He wasn't great in Vancouver in the second half of his career here, he wasn't really great in Montreal. Now in Vegas, he's actually on pace for a 37-point year, which is really great. Good on Tanner Pearson for reviving his career from these darned Canadian cities that aren't able to give him the opportunities or the fit that he needs. But having Tanner Pearson be labeled as one of the conduits in this Miller-Pettersson relationship is so interesting. Now, I will admit, I am a little bit stupid here. I always knew how to use the word conduit, but I wanted to get the full definition just to really understand where it's coming from. Conduit, a channel for conveying water or other fluids. Similar words include a channel or a duct or a pipe. Essentially, a tool that facilitates connection. And in this scenario, Tanner Pearson is the conduit, the connection that allows Miller and Petey's personalities to mix in a way that isn't out of control and that isn't detrimental to either party. And realistically, based off of the interviews, Tanner Pearson always seemed like a pretty nice dude, like a pretty reasonably kind guy, especially when you consider like how some hockey personalities can be a bit much at times. I mean, JT Miller, the testosterone, obviously we've seen that in the past. Remember when he was reading the lines in that playoff game, Final Countdown style? That sort of energy is something that ELIAS Pettersson just does not have, and ELIAS Pettersson's demeanor is not in the same realm where Miller's is, where he can yell and scream and swear on the bench and everything. Pettersson is not like that. Miller is. And we've already known for a while that JT has this sort of commanding leadership style, so to have Tanner Pearson as one of his more buddy-buddy guys to facilitate the relationship between Miller and Petey, it is an interesting dynamic that I think nobody's really talked about up until now. At the same time, I get it. You can say, hey, Miller's an $8 million player. Pettersson's an $11.5 million player. Why do you need Tanner Pearson to go out there and help you guys do your jobs properly? Just do your job properly because you're expensive. How can you make that much money and not be able to do your job on your own? And while I do acknowledge that perspective is legit, I want to kind of bring up the idea as well that maybe Tanner Pearson's presence on the Canucks was secretly a lot more beneficial than we had been led to believe. Now sure, Miller had his best season of his career last year when Tanner Pearson was gone. But what happened in the last season that Pearson was here? Well, ELIAS Pettersson had a 100-point year. Sure, Pearson didn't play the majority of that season because of his hand, but Pettersson was still good in 2022-2023. So I do kind of wonder whether or not Tanner Pearson's role on the Vancouver Canucks was a lot more underrated than we had been led to believe, and whether or not he really was the main antidote to the rift between Pettersson and Miller that we're seeing nowadays. Was it not that big of a deal because Pearson was in the room, or was it just not that big of a deal because the Canucks were winning? Because the Canucks weren't always successful in the playoffs, but in the years that they weren't, like 21-22, 22-23, Pearson was there, but the rift wasn't. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire weird rift idea. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.